Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here for day 3 of Third Decade's annual Alumni Week. We are finishing off strong with a topic that many of us face eventually, being how to combine finances and navigate money as a team. We know that money conversations could be some of the most rewarding and sometimes the most challenging parts of any relationship. And today's discussion will offer real practical guidance for managing money as a team, setting shared goals, and keeping open communication as your lives grow together. We are thrilled to be joined by James Conole, who's a CFP, MBA, and the founder of Root Financial Partners. James earned his MBA in finance from Pepperdine University and has built a reputation for making complex financial topics clear and actionable. You might also recognize him from his popular YouTube show, Ready for Retirement, which has grown to over 200,000 subscribers, as well as the broader Root Financial YouTube channel, where he shares practical insights on investing, retirement, and financial planning with audiences across the country. Outside of his professional work, James is an avid surfer, devoted husband and father, and an active member of his community. So he not only brings financial expertise, but also a real understanding of the personal side of money. At the end of tonight's webinar, we will have some time set aside to address questions from the Q&A. So just be sure to share your questions there for a chance to have them addressed live at the end. We hope you get a lot out of tonight's session. Welcome, James. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you, Nikita. Thank you, Third Decade. Thank you, Nick, for the invite to be part of it. And I'm grateful to be here. And I know this organization does incredible work. So grateful to have the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you all here. And this is one of those topics, just combining finances, budgeting, cash flow planning, whatever you want to call it, that seems like it should be simple enough. You typically think, oh, finances, the complicated stuff's the investing, the retirement planning, the taxes, the simple stuff's maybe this kind of, you might think it should be in the simple bucket. But I think that after working with so many people over so many years, like this is actually maybe one of the most difficult pieces, not just budgeting itself, but specifically budgeting and how do I combine finances with my spouse or with my partners. So as we talk through this, I'm going to share my slide or share my screen in just a second to go through some slides, but this isn't a topic where there's a single right answer versus wrong answer. Some things in finance, it's do this, check boxes 1, 2, 3, and you're good to go. This is one of those topics that's deeper than just the how to and the numbers. There's kind of a philosophical side to this. How do you approach this? There's a relational side to this of how do you do this within a relationship? There's emotional sides to this of you and your money experiences are probably different than your spouse or partner's money in their money experiences. So as I start, this is not a prescription for how everyone should do it as much as here's the things that I think you should be thinking about. And then more of a philosophical approach to how do you go about doing that. And then we'll, of course, have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share some slides here to go through that first piece before we jump in. Nikita, for whatever reason, you can't see the slides, let me know, but I think we should be good. And as we start this, again, this team portion right here is what I want to focus on. It's like, how do you navigate money as a team? And so often this is where it doesn't feel like a team. This is where it feels like there's me and my spouse or me and my partner, and we feel like a team in many ways, but not when it comes to money. And the goal of this is to say, how can you feel more like a team as you go through this? And the why behind it is a combined budget, whatever you want to call it, a cash flow plan, a budget, a money plan. It's not about saying, you can and can't do this. It's not about restrictions. It's truly about saying, how do we understand what's most important to us, what we want our money to do for us, what the ultimate goal is, and be fully aligned in the way that we spend our money and allocate our money to ensure that those areas we're spending on, the things we're putting our money into, are fully aligned with what is most important to the two of us. So the purpose is to say, let's not look at this as like I think all of us can probably relate with hating the word budget. Let's not think of budget as this restrictive thing that prevents us from doing what we want to do, as much as how can this allow us to spend money in ways that do reflect our values, so that if we're doing it correctly, it avoids guilt, it avoids second guessing. Most importantly, I think for the context of what we're talking about today, hopefully it prevents a good amount of conflict between spouses and partners who maybe aren't seeing eye to eye about how do we combine finances and how do we spend money together. So before jumping in, the actual budget piece is a little bit more tactical. That's what specific things do you need to do? I think it helps to start more high level. And by high level, just some simple conversations of what do we value together? So my wife and I, what are our financial values? What do we value spending money on? For some people, that might be time together. That might be vacations. For some people, it might be a nicer home. For some people, it might be a vehicle. For some people, it might, whatever it is. Do we like going out to eat? What's the thing that is most valuable to us? Because ideally, you want to start with what's most important, what are the things we value, and then how do we reflect that in the way that we're spending? So we don't say that the thing that we value most is travel and experiences together, but if we look at our actual budget, well, why is it that all we actually spend our money on is DoorDash all the time, and we never actually do the travel piece? So how do we allow this to kind of be the thing that helps us prioritize where our money is going, whether that's spending, whether that's saving? These are conversations of, if there's children, how do we think about supporting college? What about potential retirement? What about other things that we're saving for? And then giving. How is generosity part of what we want to do? How do we want to incorporate giving into what our values are? So before actually getting into the tactics of where do we want to do this or how do we want to do this, identifying what you value most is the right place to start. And then understanding is, what are our current money habits? I remember getting married and going into that. Very different money habits. My wife and I, now both were, I wouldn't say either were totally good or totally bad, but there was just conflict. I remember of, that's different. And at first thinking, wow, you spend money that way. That seems like it's, it almost feels bad to me, versus there's things I was doing that felt bad to her. And what I realized is these are just habits that became habits because of the way I grew up versus the way she grew up, because of the way my parents spent money versus the way her parents spent money. These are things that oftentimes we're totally oblivious to. They're blind spots for all of us. They're simply second nature. And it's good to take a step back and say, what are the things I'm doing from a money standpoint? Is that serving me, or is that not? Is that something that I want to continue to have being a habit, or is that something I want to discontinue as I'm trying to combine finances now with my spouse here? What debt and savings are you bringing into the relationship? So talking about combining finances, this is something that for a lot of people does not get brought up for a very long time. And it's kind of an awkward thing to bring up for a lot of people. It's, you don't want to take it, you want to bring it up in the very beginning of a relationship. You're talking about the fun things and there's the chemistry and you're connecting. And the last thing you want to do is say, well, tell me about your debt. Tell me about your savings. What does that look like? But if we wait too long, there's this sense of, well, now I'm caught off guard. I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that that's where, what you were or weren't bringing to the relationships. But there is an important conversation to be had there so that you're both on the same page as you're getting ready to combine finances. And then even, deal breakers. These are important conversations to have when coming into a relationship or when joining finances is, are there certain deal breakers? Are there certain things that are a priority to you that are absolutely not a priority to me? Whether it's home purchases, travel, family support's a big one. The way people think about supporting their parents potentially if they need to, or supporting their children in the future with whatever that looks like, whether that's college, whether that's saving for a home, whether it's just any type of financial support. Talk about these things, get these things out in the open, because what we're starting to do is we're starting to say, what do we both value together? Because I'll say that a lot of conflict tends to happen when you're just jumping into the budget, because you view the budget as like, here's my idea and here's your idea, and sometimes those clash. But if we can look at the high ground, my guess is for a lot of you, especially as you're combining finances, there's a ton of alignment. There's a tremendous amount of alignment on what do we actually value? What do we actually want to do together as a couple? Where are we trying to go here? The conflict doesn't happen high level. It typically happens at the tactical level, which is much more of an expression of my way of growing up versus my spouse's way of growing up, my money habits versus her money habits. And if all we're doing is saying my habit's better or her habit's better, or this is my experience and this is your habit and this is your experience, there's going to be conflict. But if we can take the high ground and say, well, let's set that aside for a second. What are our actual financial values? What are our values in general? Set aside the financial piece, and then gradually start to work down to say, okay, here's our values. Let's now talk about kind of our current position. Where are we today? What are my money habits? What are your money habits? What debts or savings am I bringing to the relationship? What debts or savings are you bringing to the relationship? What are those things that I might view as a deal breaker? What are those things that you might view as a deal breaker, or just things that we don't totally agree on? Once you've done those things, then the final step is that tactical piece of how do you now actually align on that? How do you actually now combine finances? And I know there's many different aspects of combining finances. Most specifically, we're going to be talking about today that budget piece, that cash flow piece, because I think that's where the most amount of conflict typically happens, is an agreed upon way of how and where are we going to spend money. But this is where you should start. From there, this is, as I mentioned before, not prescriptive. This is actually kind of the way I personally have done this with my wife, and it's worked really effectively. And a lot of people I've talked to, it's worked effectively for them. So plenty of time, like I mentioned, for Q&A if anyone has other ideas or questions, but this is what I found at a very tactical level to be most helpful. Let's say that my wife and I, we get married, and she has income, I have income, and we're combining that. And all of a sudden we're married, and wow, double the income comes in. And let's just say that total number, I'm just going to use make up numbers here, obviously adapt them to yourself, but we have $10,000 per month coming in. That's really exciting. We have $10,000 per month. Look at all we can spend with $10,000 per month. And that seems like a lot until my wife and I go through, well, wait a minute, of that $10,000 per month, a lot of it's already accounted for. You know, we have these joint expenses now. Let's start by understanding of that 10,000, how much is already spent before we actually make the decision to swipe the credit card or before any direct deposit or direct kind of auto transactions happen. When we look at this, this is things like housing. So a mortgage or rent, utilities, gym membership, subscriptions, you might add those things up. And when people get so tripped up on how does 10,000 per month come in each month, but at the end of the month, nothing's left. And now I'm talking and I'm upset at my spouse because why did you spend money there? Why do we spend money there? Why don't we have anything left? A lot of the times is because our perception is 10,000 per month is coming in. But the reality is when you think about those recurring expenses, those normal recurring expenses, a lot of that 10,000 has already been accounted for. Well, I'm spending 3,000 per month on rent. And then we have our gym memberships. And then we have, whatever streaming services we have. And then we have our cell phone bills. And these are specific things that they're the exact same every month. It's not a discretionary expense. It's not like, okay, I'm making the decision to go out and spend $100 on dinner together. These are just things that are going to happen whether I actively make them happen or not. My phone bill is going to happen. My car insurance is going to happen. And when you start with that, what it's giving you is a lot of clarity. Okay, 10,000 is coming in, but oh my goodness, like 6,000, that's already accounted for without us actually consciously deciding to go spend money on anything. So if I use that as the example, what that's showing us, what's that showing my wife and I is, okay, we have $4,000 left, the two of us, to actually spend on everything else. So what's next? Well, now we need to talk about shared goals. Like that's before we've talked about retirement savings or saving for a home down payment or putting money aside for kids or whatever the case might be. How do we now bake those in? And again, this comes back to values. If you don't know what you value and what you want to prioritize, some of these are difficult. If I want a really expensive home in a really expensive city and my wife says, no, I want to move here to a much less expensive area because maybe it's closer to my parents or that's where I want to raise a family. Well, this decision right here is going to be very different of how much do we save towards a down payment. If I say, you know what, I don't want to save anything for our children's college. I think that that's something they should pay for out of pocket on their own. And my wife's saying, no, I really want to support them. My experience was my parents did that for me. And I really find it important to do it for our kids. Again, this goes back to values and you need to then add those shared goals in. And going back to that example, you have 10,000, some of that's already coming out. That's already accounted for. Now, this is the piece where we are deciding together, what are we deciding? This is a proactive decision to put away for retirement, for home down payment, for kids, etc. Then discretionary expenses. Okay, let's assume now we're down to 3,000 extra per month. So 6,000 was committed for just the recurring normal expenses. 1,000 is the combined amount we're saving for home down payment, retirement, kids. Okay, Ashley. So my wife's name is Ashley. And Ashley, we now have $3,000 left. But you know what we've done is we've paid for the home. We have our cell phone bills covered. We have our Spotify thing covered. We that's covered, but we haven't budgeted anything yet to go out to eat. We haven't budgeted anything yet to go out and travel. So this is where we have the decision. Okay, how much do we want to allocate towards those types of things? These things that they're recurring in the sense that every month we're going to be going out to dinner. Every month we're going to be doing something fun, but it's not the same exact amount every time. The decision to go to a really nice restaurant versus go down the street to In-N-Out, that's a conscious decision that has different implications in terms of how much are we actually spending. So now we're saying, okay, let's align on how much we want to spend on some of these expenses that are discretionary in nature, but they're going to happen on a recurring basis. dining, fun. Travel is not something that's going to happen every single month, but what we do like to do every month is put away a little bit of money, because if we want to, for example, take one trip a year, that's $6,000. I don't want to have to try to figure out how to pay $6,000 when that actually happens. I want to put $500 away per month into a separate savings account. So when it comes time to take that trip, it's not panic time. How on earth do we come up with this, charge the credit card, and then spend the next 3 months fighting about how do we pay it off? It's no, that 6,000 is there. We've already thought about this. It's set aside. We can now go spend the money and enjoy our trip together. And then finally, I think it's very important to have alignment, to agree upon what are we contributing, what are we valuing, what are we spending money on. But it's also very important that my wife doesn't think that every single thing that she purchases, she has to run by me. I don't have to think that anytime I want to make a purchase, do something with friends, do something that's just for me, I don't want to have to run everything by Ashlyn. So how do we balance that? How do we get alignment on the shared goals and things we want to do together, but also have some degree of freedom? So what we do is we just have individual fund money. Ashlyn, X number of dollars each month. This goes into an account that's just yours. You don't have to ask me for permission. I'm never going to get upset at you for spending money on that. In the same way, I'm going to have a separate account that's just me. And I have X number of dollars going in there. And whether I want to blow all that money on day one of the month, or I want to save that money up for a couple months, a few months, because I want to buy a new surfboard, because I want to buy a new thing that's a bit more expensive. That's completely on me. So I have that freedom to do what I want without judgment, without conflict. Ashlyn has the same. And I think that's very important, that even within this context, let's align on what our goals are, but also align on the fact that each of us needs to have some fun money that can be spent completely separately. Pitfalls to avoid. And as I mentioned before, a lot of this is not like a formula for success. This is not a do this and then you're good. This is more of a here's how I like to think about it. And then as you put questions in the chat, and if you haven't done so already, if you do have a question, feel free to do so. Nikita's gonna be monitoring that. And at the end, we'll be going through that and answering any questions that come up. But an important way to maximize the odds of success with this is to understand what are the pitfalls that other people fall into? What are the challenges that are likely going to present themselves if we don't take steps to alleviate them? One here is one spouse or one partner being left in the dark. Very common to have one spouse, one partner that typically is more involved with the finances, and the other who's typically not. You don't have to come to the relationship with the same exact level of involvement. You don't need to say both of us are going to care the same amount. Both of us are going to enjoy the same amount. It's very rare. Are both partners going to be the exact same in terms of their involvement with the financial decisions? But when you have a spouse that tends to enjoy this more and one that enjoys it less, when you have one spouse that tends to be the money person and the other's not, a certain degree of that is fine, but you cannot leave either in the dark. Both have to align on what are we trying to accomplish here and what amounts are we going to allocate, or what amount are we going to put in the budget for each of this thing? Because that dollar amount that you're assigning to each of these things, if we just think of that as a dollar amount, if we just think of that as a budget, it's going to feel like there's a disconnect there. But if we assign each budget line item as this is a reflection of our value that we are prioritizing our health. So that's why we're spending this on a gym membership. But if we're doing that, practically speaking, we're spending more money there. That means there's less money over here for these other things. Maybe for dining out, maybe for travel, maybe for whatever. So as long as we're aligned and the one spouse isn't saying, well, why can't I spend money here? Or why can't I spend money there? It's important to make sure both of you are fully aligned on what you're doing and fully aware of how that money is being allocated, even if one of you tends to be more of the quote unquote money person in the relationship. Assuming your way is the right way. This is just human nature. I fall into this trap, you fall into this trap, we all fall into this trap. The reason we do the things we do is because we think they're the right way. And if we can't take a big step back and say, maybe there's other ways, or more importantly, if I can't take a big step back and say, maybe my way is the right way. But you know what? If 100% is, if me doing things 100% my way is leading to combining money in a way that works 0% for either of us. And if my wife is thinking like, hey, I want to do 100 things 100% my way, but that's leading to 0% of it working for the both of us, is it better to say, okay, well, I'm going to do it 80% my way and she's going to do it 80% way, because there's alignment there And maybe I'm budging, maybe I'm sacrificing on some things I really feel strongly are the right way to do. But how can I prioritize harmony? How can I prioritize partnership here as opposed to the tactical thing that this is the way that it has to get done? So don't always assume that your way is the right way. The right way is the way that's going to lead to mutual success for the both of you, even if that means you're not doing things exactly the way you would prefer them to be done, like you were before you were in this partnership or this marriage. The third is not revisiting the plan as life changes. I can tell you that my wife and I, our money plan, our budget, it was so good until we had children. And then all of a sudden it's things go out the window. Well, there's this expense because now all of a sudden we need the pediatrician. There's that expense because we don't love our kids if we don't get them that toy. And there's this expense because now all of a sudden we got to start planning for 529 savings plan. So if you're not revisiting this every so often, kids, job changes, big purchases, major life events where income's much higher or much lower, where expenses are much higher or much lower, this is something that's not going to be a set it and forget it type thing that needs to be reviewed, especially when there's big life changes. And then the fourth one is ignoring the emotional and behavioral side of money. My guess is for all of you that have money fights with a spouse or partner, my guess is that's all of you at some point have had conflict here. I think if you were to really unpack the foundation of that fight, it didn't actually have anything to do with the money itself. It had everything to do with the emotional or behavioral side of the money. Something touching upon a wound that someone had based upon how they were raised with money. One person coming in the marriage and money was super scarce and super tight, and there's a lot of fear around that growing up, versus the other coming into the marriage with plenty of money and money was never an issue for them. It would be impossible to think that the both of you are going to see money the exact same way, especially from an emotional or behavioral standpoint. For some people, money represents security, control. For others, it represents freedom and opportunity. And just even understanding those things means that the things you do with that money, the emotions around money are going to be very different. So it doesn't mean you need to understand everything. Just understand when I'm having a conflict around money, is it perhaps a deeper issue than me going out and spending $15 on something that my spouse didn't think I should be spending money on? Maybe there's something a bit deeper than that. Tools to use, kind of jumping around a little bit here. YNAB is you need a budget. Mint is an option. Monarch, spreadsheet. So this is more something I'm not going to go through the pros and cons of each of the budgeting apps, but if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and I can address them more as the end. Let me see how time here. Okay, I think we're doing good on time. So we have this. So monthly money date. This is something that if you view your money not as something to be avoided because it causes conflict, if you view your money not as something that's something that leads to strife or conflict in marriage, but if you view this as something of how can my spouse and I, how can we use this as the tool to say, once we have an aligned vision for where we want to go in the future and what's important to us, this is simply the tool or the mechanism by which we're going to accomplish that. The money date can be quite fun. It doesn't need to be something where, one of you in the relationship who's more of the nerd and loves the money and wants to show all the spreadsheets and all the don't do that. But talk about, here's what we said we wanted to do. Maybe we said we wanted to start saving money, like I used an example, to take that vacation once a year for $6,000. It'd be very cool. Just here's our progress. We're 4 months in, we've built up $2,000 because we've saved $500 a month for 4 months, plus a little bit of interest on that. That feels good. Hey, we said we wanted to start saving this amount to our 401k and start putting a bit of money into a Roth IRA each month. Here's how much we've been able to do with that. We said that we didn't want to spend any more on dining out. We tend to go over budget a couple $100 each month. Where do we either want to cut back on that in terms of maybe spending a little bit less at some restaurants, or if that's not what we want to do, if we decide, no, that's actually a really important thing for us, we have a wonderful time, these restaurants, these date nights, these are an awesome part of our experience together. Well, where do we want to pull back on? Does that mean we're pulling a couple $100 from our vacation fund instead of saving up $6,000 by the end of the year? We're just going to be putting, $400 a month in, $300 per month in, and we'll have the trade-off be either a less expensive vacation or a less frequent vacation. So it's just that opportunity, not to say you spent more. It's an opportunity to say, here's what our goals are. Here's what we're doing. Does this still feel aligned to what's important to us? So starting high level, what are your values? What do you want to accomplish? Those are the things that my guess is most of you with your partner and spouse actually feel a whole lot of alignment with. It's as you start to get more and more tactical, where a lot of the conflict and the issues come up. And these are hopefully some frameworks or tools that you can use to have productive conversations around that. So Nikita, I'll toss it over to you. I don't know if there's questions that have come up or anything that you want to add before we jump right into that.
Yeah, there are some that we received ahead of time, so I'm going to go ahead and start with those, and then anyone else who's been waiting until the end to share their questions, please add them to the Q&A. But do you have any advice on combining finances once you've been in an established long-term relationship with separate finances? Is there a time frame in relationships in which you should combine?
My philosophy is the sooner the better, and the less you do, the more challenges. It just, this is maybe very practical thing. It just seems harder to me. And what we have to realize is even if you're keeping finances totally separate, you're kind of doing the same thing we just looked at, except maybe having more like individual money. It's still the, okay, well, Nikita, you cover the mortgage and I'll cover the groceries. You cover the cell phone bills, I'll cover the Spotify subscriptions. I'm just making stuff. So it's still that, it just maybe in a more disjointed way, a less planned out way. So I think to me, and this is like, I think that when you are getting married, like there's a lot there that combining finances in the way that I talked about for a number of reasons, most simply put to me is like, it's most simple. Like everything's out on the open. Now we can have that conversation of, Nikita, how much money do you get that's just your money that just you spend and I don't touch it? Awesome. James, how much money do you get that I spend however I want? But to me, the earlier the better, and it leads to fewer conflicts because there's more alignment from the beginning.
Yeah, it's a great way to think about it. How soon should we start having these conversations? Like maybe not combining yet, but you're in a new relationship. Is it too soon on month 3 to start talking about this?
Yeah, that's I don't know if there's a time frame I would look at as much as if you're thinking it, my guess is your partner's probably also thinking it. But it's an awkward thing just to bring up of, hey, so, tell me about your credit card debt. Hey,
What
tell
do
me
you
about
think
your
is a
student
practical
loans.
way
Hey,
of
so
wording
there's a way of, I think do it in a way that's exciting. Like, hey, we've been dating a few months. We've been together a few months. Like, what are your dreams for like where you think you want to live one day? What are your dreams for kind of the life you want to build one day? What are the dreams for what travel looks like, what family looks like? And those are very high level things I think everyone enjoys talking about. And then from there, that becomes, oh, awesome. You want a house that might cost quite a bit. Like, have you thought about how much might need to be saved to do that? Oh, cool. Have you already started putting away some money for that? I know I have. I've started saving a few dollars here for home purchase. Oh, cool. You're trying to, but like student loans are, it sounds like maybe your priority right now, trying to get those paid off. So it's one of those things where I would take it like very high level and kind of go towards, at some point you might feel like some resistance there. And I think you need to monitor in the moment. Is this something that maybe, that's as far as I'm going to take it right now and I table this for another time? Or is there some resistance there? And that's maybe something that's worth pushing into a little bit, not because I need to know the finances as much as like, hey, that might be a sore spot. There might be some trust issues. There might be something there that are worth considering for a variety of other reasons, not just a financial piece. Because my philosophy is like the more you know about each other, the sooner the better. It's one thing if you're dating someone in middle school, of course you're not going to talk about stuff. Like once you're a grown adult and you're seeing someone, like you're probably pretty early on wondering, like, is this individual someone that I want to commit a lot of time and energy and resources to? And they're probably thinking the same thing about you. So the sooner these conversations can happen, the better.
Yeah, that might be a good segue into maybe what are some, I'll say, red flags that might cue you into like maybe there's hidden debt, or maybe there's problematic behavior around finances with a person, or in extreme cases like potential signs of financial abuse. Could you speak to any of that? Maybe some red flags to look out for?
Well, I think, yeah, and I want to preface all this. I'm, of course, not a relationship therapist. There's probably a lot of this is way out of my league. So I don't want to pretend to be an expert in an area that I'm not an expert. But I do think even like what I just mentioned of that, start that high level conversation. I think most most reasonable people like want to know these things. They just don't want to be the person that broaches the subject. And so if I'm talking, to my spouse who I'm now married to, and all of a sudden a simple, innocent question, I can tell it hits her a certain way. Like, okay, do you mind sharing? Like, what happened there? Like, it seems like that really bothered you that I asked that question. It seems like, just starting to ask these questions of, was there financial abuse? Is this something that you feel a certain degree of embarrassment or even shame about? Like, what is that? I think those are things that it could potentially be a red flag if I want to stay away from this, or it could just potentially like, man, like that's an opportunity for vulnerability and to like get to know you better at a deeper level, that share with, like, I hope you feel safe enough and open enough to share that stuff with me, especially if this is going to trend towards marriage. Like, but we need to be that for each other. So, I don't know that there's red flag. Like there are certain red flags like, okay, I know what this person does for a living. Maybe I don't know their income exactly, but I can guess. And I don't know, I see what you're spending and driving and doing this. Like, is there some reckless financial behavior? Like, those are some basic ones I think you could probably get a sense of. Not everything on the outside is what it, is exactly as it appears when you actually pull back the cover. So that might be a good reason to be a little bit cautious and see like, how is this happening? But I think the other ones are more like the emotional side, the behavioral side of, if it's hard to talk about now, it doesn't get any easier when you're married and now you have a mortgage together and children together and other stuff like it. Those are things to unpack early on, I think.
Yeah, and I do think having these really uncomfortable conversations, while it's uncomfortable early on, if you're in a strong relationship, they can really actually bring a lot of closeness and better understanding of one another. So
yeah, agreed.
We have a question. What do you think of prenuptials for couples that are in a similar financial position? Is it necessary for security or not really relevant if there is no major breadwinner?
If there's no major breadwinner and there's not a whole lot coming in, like, no, it's not. And again, I want to preface, like, this is finance, so there's a lot to this. There's a legal side to this. There's a kind of a lot philosophical side to this. There's a protection side to this. Like, there's a whole bunch of details to this. No, if you like, I don't have a prenup for what it's for. Like, we came in there, like, I didn't have anything when I came into marriage. My wife didn't. So like, it was easy enough. Like, simple. If something doesn't work out, we're both walking away with nothing at this point. So it's like, it's typically when there's a significant difference in what you're coming into the marriage with, especially if you have any amount of suspicion that like, maybe is what I'm bringing to the marriage from a financial standpoint a big part of what my future spouse is interested in, for coming into the marriage. So if you're on the same playing field, like, there's not a whole lot. It's essentially protecting like what you're coming into the marriage with. Those are equal. There's not maybe a whole lot of actual practical solutions, and that's, I'm not going to say that's 100% true all the time, but just generalities.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We have another one. Would you advise waiting to combine finances until you've paid off personal debts like credit cards?
I would say no, because I think that a lot of times when people do that, it might be more out of like it's not for practical reasons. It might be more like an embarrassment. It's like, I don't want to go, like, this person who I love and the relationship's new, I don't want to go say, hey, here's my debt baggage. And so it tends to be more like an avoidance behavior, but it's just kind of putting off how. And by the way, I don't think you should combine, like, if you're just starting to date someone, you shouldn't be combining finances. I think that's crazy. So I'm talking more like by the time that you are committed and married to that person, like, I do think there should be a combination of finances. But I think that if you're both in the marriage already, and so I don't know the context of the question, like, is this, I've been dating someone for 2 weeks, or have we been married for 2 decades at this point? I've seen, and this sounds absurd, like kind of crazy to say, like, I have seen so many marriages totally thrive in the middle of paying off debt together, because there's this sense of like, hey, this is now our mutual challenge, our mutual burden, and we are going to do this together. And whether it's saving for something together, paying something down together, there is this amazing bond that does happen when you're fully aligned to say, like, this isn't yours or mine, like this is ours together, and we're going to attack this together. There's something that actually builds the relationship in that. So my recommendation would be, assuming that this person's already at that marriage stage, not just newly dating, that, yeah, I would recommend, like, at least being open about it, but secondarily saying, like, hey, how do we, here's where I am. Here's, like, again, going back to here's where we want to be. You want to be there. I want to be there. I can't wait to get there together. To me, I think it makes sense to really fully attack this credit card debt first. I think this is something maybe we should do together. And then that enables us to start saving for these awesome vacations. And then that enables us to start putting more money away for retirement. And then so there's an opportunity for alignment there as opposed to staying separate.
Yeah, and I think it's honestly so fun to be able to like knock out goals together, and it feels like you can get so much farther whenever you have two of you going at the same goal as well. So
one more thing I'll add to that, Nikki, like the happiest I've ever seen clients wasn't when, they saved $1 million together, or they hit a big bonus together, or the happiest I've ever seen clients from like a pure financial thing was when they paid off a mortgage together. And I know that's not credit, that's different, but there's this sense of like, we tackled that together. People literally in tears, how happy they were together doing that, versus, cool, we saved another X amount of dollars together for our future. So there is something powerful if you're doing it right together.
that's really cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. How would you recommend the combination of finances being managed whenever there is one earner in the household and the other person is a stay-at-home parent?
So I think it's the same way. Like, this is, it wasn't this way when my wife and I were, and I don't want to make this about me. I'm just kind of using us as a practical example. Like when I got married, my wife was working, I was working. And the way we would do it is both of our income now comes to one account, like one bank account. James's paycheck goes there, Ashton's paycheck goes there. And then even to add on to kind of the example I gave, we would literally set up different accounts of, okay, here's our recurring expenses. 10,000, I'll use that sample number again. 10,000 is coming in between the two of us. I don't care how much of that James contributed versus how much Ashton contributed. That is our money. X number of dollars is going to the separate account, and that account's just going to be spent by month end because rent's due, insurance is due, cell phone bills are due. If we have 6,000 of that, we're going to deposit 6,000 in day one. By the end of the month, it's going to be down to zero. Okay, then we have like our groceries and gas account, and we have a separate debit card that literally would just debit from that. And so it's a specific number, but there's the potential to overspend there if we're not careful. We can't overspend on rent. Like, rent is rent is rent. We can't overspend on our YouTube TV bills. Like, it's just fixed. Like, this is a separate category where we could do that. Then we had our like individual accounts, the James account, the Ashton account, etc. That stayed the exact same once we had children and she started staying at home and her income went away and she was raising children. The only difference was the income number changed. So I think the framework is the exact same of, if you're fully combining, income goes to the same place. It's just now the income is going to look different if one spouse is working and one spouse isn't. And I think we have to look at that as, this isn't, oh, Ashton's not contributing and James is. It's no, this was part of our values that we talked about of what we want our life to look like. So sure, there's a financial piece that I'm contributing, she's not, but there's also mother component that she's able to contribute and I'm not fully able to at the same degree. So it doesn't change even though, well, you get less allowance or I get more allowance. It's just, here's the framework. The only thing that changes is that top line number that gets deposited into it.
Thank you for covering that. I know that one comes up fairly often for our participants who have children and are evaluating potentially one person staying at home. So do you have any advice on how to reconcile if one partner wants to combine, but the other one doesn't?
Yeah, that can be very challenging. I'm going to go high level with it again. If I'm pushing my wife to combine and she doesn't want to, and I keep saying, well, we got to know where money's going together, we got to track everything, that's probably not super compelling. What is super compelling is going back to, hey, Ashton, like you and I have talked about the fact that this is what we want our life to look like. Here's where we want to go in the future. I want to do that as a team. Like, I want to do that as effectively as possible. And if we're both kind of pulling in different directions with our finances because we're not aligned, we're not doing this together, it's just practically speaking, we're probably not going to get to where we want to go, or it's going to take us a heck of a lot longer to do so. So I would start there and kind of bring it back to that high ground of, this isn't doing it because James wants to do it, or I need to track every penny that you're doing, as much as I want us to be fully on track for what we've talked about we want our life to look like. Combining finances is a great way to do that. If there's still pushback, I might go back to what I said earlier, like try to figure out the reason why behind it. Don't just assume it's a financial thing. Is it because there's an embarrassment thing, a trust thing? Maybe they don't trust you. Maybe they don't think you fully trust them, like whatever that might be. Is it a communication thing of, well, whenever we do things your way, you just kind of beat it over my head and we never really get, I don't feel like I get a say in it. Therefore, like, this is my way of keeping a little bit of control over my part of the finances. So like, there's typically a deeper issue, I would say, if there's really strong resistance to making that happen. It's not, so there's not like a tactical say these magic words and it, boom, like that, you're good, as much as try to align. And can you say, we're trying to mutually do this together? If that doesn't work, maybe try to understand where they're coming from a bit more, because just forcing it is not going to be super effective.
Yeah, that's true. And what about for people who don't want to fully combine? Is there maybe a starting place they could go, or an alternative version of combining, but like still having some more feelings of like safety and separateness? Like, do you have anything to share in that regard?
Well, I think that assuming you're living together, everything is combined. It's just tactically how are you doing it? Like, is okay. If I was in a separate house and you were in a separate house and I bought my own groceries and you bought your own groceries and you covered your gas, and like, that's the only way they're truly separate. But like, if we're truly living together, eating the same groceries from the same fridge, watching the same TV, the same electric bill that's given light to our home, we have combined our finances. It's just, is it an effective way or a non-effective way? And a lot of people, it's okay, still separate accounts, and I cover this, you cover that. That's a way to do it. It's kind of like the same thing, just with less alignment. I've used that word probably 1,000 times. Maybe I'll try to use a different one at some point, but it's just, it's, you could accomplish the same thing more effectively, in my opinion, when everything's on the table, everything's out there. So yeah, you could, like, I could have a separate account, my wife could have a separate account, and you could try to agree upon, you buy the groceries this week, I buy them next week. I pay half, like, it, to me, it just gets more complicated because it's like the trying to track that all. And then also feels a little bit like we're not a team. We're more like a joint venture here. Not, it's a, you do this, I do that, as opposed to we are doing this together. So I don't know if I have great tips for it, because I haven't, it's like, it's not something I've personally ever done. So I don't feel like I have a lot of personal experience to offer. And at the end, you're still combining, you're just not maybe providing full visibility on what's going on to each other.
Yeah, I'll speak personally for just a second. I've tried actually, I think, every type of combining or not combining, and I got married fairly young. So like you had said, you came into your marriage with nothing. You didn't bother with a prenup, pretty much in the same place. So it was sort of interesting, like navigating this along the way. But I think one of the methods that I have heard some success, if there are people who maybe feel some apprehension, maybe one person earns like a lot more than the other, there's you can do equitable contributions, and then like people do sometimes like having, maybe your bills are joint, but then let's say you have money beyond the bills that are available to you, you can in theory keep that separate, and it just totally depends on your relationship, your life stage, all sorts of things. But I will say that, I've experienced both sides of it. Now that I have kids, fully combined is the route. I don't want to be thinking about what's his, what's mine, and that kind of thing. But that's just another idea for anybody who maybe it doesn't resonate to fully combine all in. That's one idea that I know about. I think we have another question that came through. Oh, I think it was about what to do if you have two partners, but a large imbalance of income. Do you have anything you'd want to add on that front, James, beyond what I just shared?
Oh, I think And to add on to what you say, yeah, like a lot of what I'm speaking to is personal experience and what I've learned. My personal experience is not everything. So there's obviously things that you can do. If there's a large imbalance, it goes back to the philosophy. Is it, James is an Ashland's, or is it, okay, it's ours. Whether James earns it or Ashland earns it, like, it doesn't matter that much. And you can, totally up to you. And what's your philosophy towards what marriage is, towards how you're approaching that, towards all that stuff. If there's a large imbalance, I'm pausing a little bit because I'm trying to think through, like, not just my recommendation, it's just ours. Okay, if James is bringing in a ton, or if Ashland's bringing in a ton, hopefully that means, like, we can ramp up what we're saving for our future. We can ramp up our individual fund accounts. Like, if you wanted to say, no, I'm bringing a lot more, maybe you think about, like, the joint expenses you're fully doing together. Maybe, like, the way I might think about the framework I gave is, like, is the individual with a higher contribution, do they have more of the fund money, the account that you don't have to ask permission to spend, because you feel like, hey, no, I brought that, so therefore I'm going to be the one that, like, I don't need to ask my spouse permission for this. I think that's healthy to have that. Do you want to have an alignment there, or misalignment? Do you want to have an imbalance there? I guess that's fine if you're both agreeing to that and your spouse. So it's a philosophical question, I would say, more than a tactical question of right or wrong answer.
Yeah, and I think it, like you said, is just so dependent on the relationship too. For some people, it works, and you're not coming in with any sort of baggage. I know I've talked with participants who absolutely experienced some financial troubles in previous relationships, so you might be a little bit more apprehensive in your next long-term relationship, and that makes sense. But yeah, there are lots of different ways to approach it, and yeah.
And like I said, Nikki, like, this is probably the thing that's hardest about finances, is just the shared expense, the shared budget, and all that stuff. The thing that seems like it's not the investments that are hard, it's the tax strategies, the retirement, like, that stuff's very black and white. Like, do this, don't do that. This is the messiness that comes with everyone here being a human with their own experiences around money, and trying to combine those with another messy human with their messy experiences around money.
Yeah, that's very well said. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your time with us tonight and sharing your expertise. I'm sure our audience enjoyed it as well. I look forward to hearing people's response about it. I'm going to go ahead and in the chat, I'm also going to share a link to your YouTube channel, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. I also have I can send this to you, Nikita, if I didn't already, like, a blog post that literally maps out how my wife and I do our personal budget, kind of like expands upon what we talked about today, if that'd be helpful. Again, that is my experience, my way. It's not the only way, but
that would be fantastic. We're going to be sending out the recording, and we'll include it with that.
Perfect. I will shoot that to you in an email.
Thank you all. And
thanks,
I guess
everyone.
This concludes Alumni Week. So thank you all for joining us. I hope you were able to maybe sit in on a few of the webinars, or a couple of the webinars, I should say. For those of you that are in Phoenix and you RSVP'd, we look forward to seeing you at tomorrow's happy hour. But I hope you all have a wonderful night, and thank you for spending your evening with us. Thank you, James, again.
Thanks, everyone.